Hi, my name is Kathy Kennedy, and today I am at Summerhill Landscape Nursery, and we're going to be talking about hydrangea care with Maggie and Norma from Summerhill. Maggie, what can you tell us about some of the issues that that people might find with their hydrangea?
So hydrangea get a few issues. Typically they don't really affect the plant's overall health. The main thing with hydrangeas is making sure that they're happy. Every plant, you want to make sure they're happy and healthy, because then they can fight off diseases, they can fight off pests much better. It's just the same as humans. So the main thing is test your soil. Make sure that your soil is in the right pH. Hydrangeas, like most plants, like slightly acidic, so maybe like a 5.5 to 7 pH. And then from there you can also change the color of the Macrophylla hydrangea, but that's, again, you need to test your soil to see what the pH is. So if you want it more blue, it should be lower than 5.5. If you want it to be more pink, higher than 5.5. So that's kind of where you want to be, but typically always slightly acidic for all hydrangea. After testing the soil, you want to make sure that they're watered well, especially in the dry periods. Make sure they have enough water. And then the biggest thing that I find with the disease problem is irrigation and overhead irrigation. So anytime that the leaf is wet and water stays on the leaf, it's a perfect environment for fungus to grow. So if there's overhead irrigation coming into your hydrangea beds, it's just a perfect place for all this fungus to grow. So it's best to keep your lawn irrigation out of your beds whenever possible. Also, you want to just be able to dry out the leaves as quickly as possible. So maybe plant them in a place where the morning dew will dry off quickly, or prune them so that there's airflow throughout the plants. And that way the leaves will dry quickly, less time for the fungus to grow. So then we have a few diseases that we typically see. The first one is called Cercospora leaf spot, and that's usually like maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch sort of spots on the leaves, and there'll be dark purplish spots. The inside of the spots will be a lighter brown, and the most important control for Cercospora leaf spot is to prune out the leaves, the diseased leaves, as soon as you see them. Any diseased leaf that stays on the plant is just inoculum so that the spores can splash onto other leaves. So especially if you have that overhead irrigation coming on and there's a leaf with the Cercospora disease, it will just splash onto the other plants and other leaves, and then you'll have an issue. The other disease that we see commonly is anthracnose. Those spots will be a little bit bigger and a darker brown. A lot of times they go on the outside of the plant and they kind of curl the leaf margins in. So that's kind of the same thing. Just prune out all the diseased leaves as soon as you see them. Any diseased leaf will not recover and it will not go back to normal. It's there. So it's better to prune it out as soon as possible so it doesn't spread. Both of those diseases you can use a copper fungicide on, and those will be sold in garden stores. We also sometimes see powdery mildew on leaves, and that will kind of look like the plant is covered in dust, like a gray dust, but it doesn't really wash off. And the powdery mildew tends to come out in late summer when there's cold nights and hot, moist days. So when the moisture is really high and it's hot during the day, and then at night it gets temperature drops, that's when you'll start to see the powdery mildew. Again, just prune out the powdery mildew. You can use a horticultural soap or a horticultural oil or an insecticidal soap or neem oil. Those can all be found at your garden stores. But once again, just make sure that the plants are healthy, because that's the main thing, and then they'll be able to fight off the disease. As far as pests go, pests are never a really big issue for hydrangea. We see mites sometimes, and they'll get stippling on the leaves. So it's kind of these yellow little spots. And then if you flip it over, sometimes you can see these tiny little orange things running around. So that's a 2-spotted spider mite. Typically, just leave them. Nature will run its course. There'll be beneficial insects that will come in and eat them, and you'll be fine. If it's a really, really bad infestation, you can use a neem oil to try to reduce that. And then aphids are another problem that we occasionally see, and they'll be a little bit bigger, green. You'll be able to see their long legs, but it's kind of the same thing with them. They don't cause too much of an issue. They do secrete honeydew, and then sometimes a sooty mold fungus grows on top of the honeydew. That can interfere with photosynthesis if there's a lot, but typically it's not an issue, because if you look and you see a lot of aphids, usually there's a bigger aphid or a ladybug or something around that's going to come and eat them. So it's better to just leave it and let nature run its course. But again, you can use a neem oil if the infestation gets really bad. Other than that, that's about it. Make sure that the plants are happy, healthy, and then they'll be able to fight off most of the things that we see here.
So I'm with Norma now from Summerhill, and Norma's going to talk a little bit about identifying your hydrangeas and also their pruning care, which is really important. So Norma, take it away.
Good morning. There is all different types of hydrangeas that we use out here, and there's different flowering times. They're used to keep the flowering going through the whole season. This one we're standing in front is a Hydrangea Tardiva. It's normally used as a backdrop because it gets tall and has beautiful white flowers. July, August, it's one of the later flowering hydrangeas compared to your Annabelles or Macrophylla hydrangeas. The flowers on the Tardiva are pinnacle, and they're a bigger white flower. They don't change colour, they're white. Coming into the fall, they might get a little bit, they'll turn a little bit red or pink as the weather gets cooler. Then we have a limelight hydrangea, which is similar to the Tardiva, but their flowers are a little bit smaller, and the flower petals are closer together. Then you have smaller hydrangeas, which is the Macrophylla, which is our endless summers, and you have Annabelles. Annabelles are white, and they flower generally, they're one of the earlier flowering hydrangeas. They flower June, July, and with the Macrophylla as well, like the endless summer, they're blue, and as Maggie said, they can be pink as well, depending on the acidity of the soil. And there again, their flowering time is into June, July. If the weather during the summer is a little bit cooler and they're in dapple shade, you might get a longer flowering period from them. If they're in bright sun and hot area, the flowers will fade quicker. Now they don't like dense shade, but they'll take dapple shade. Then we have an Oakleaf Hydrangea, which is one of like the Annabelles, it's one of the earlier flowering ones. This will take more shade than any hydrangea, and they have white conical flowers as well, and they are normally pruned once they finish flowering. Most of our hydrangeas that I've just spoken about are pruned in the springtime, and the climbing hydrangeas and Oakleaf hydrangeas are done normally when they're finished flowering. So onto the pruning. Normally when you look first at it, I suppose with any plant and with a hydrangea plant, what you want to take out first is dead or diseased wood or damaged. That's what you're really taking out, because anything dead is not going to come back. Anything diseased or damaged is going to deteriorate and die eventually. So that's the first thing we look at when we're taking out. Will we take a little bit out?
Yeah,
here?
let's take a look at this one and see what you've got. I'm going to come a little closer.
If you see, this is something that's dead. So this comes out, and actually all this one as well.
And when it's in a dormant state, how do you know that it's actually dead? How can you tell?
If you look, I mean,
oh yeah,
the bark is starting to come off. And usually a good test as well, if you're unsure, you can run your fingernail along it.
Oh yeah.
And you can see that is dead. And if you run your finger along one that's alive, you have green. You can see.
Yes. Oh yeah.
There, that it's green. So it's just a test. You don't need to cut it straight away. Rub your nail along it, and then you'll see if it's dead or not.
Great, great.
And usually with pruning, Make sure you have the right tools. Don't make sure they're sharp, but if you have a thicker branch, you want to be using a loppers as well, so you get a cleaner cut. So what we will do, this one is all dead. So, and when we're cutting, you want to go back in to the stem as close as you can. Like here, you don't want to leave a notch out like this, or like here, because it just dies away.
And so what is really, aside from getting rid of the dead and diseased, is there any benefit to pruning a hydrangea?
Now, as Maggie had said before, that you want air circulation to prevent all diseases coming in, like the leaf spot she had spoke about, the anthracnose. That's what you're trying to prevent as well. Let airflow circulate through the hydrangea. And as well shape. I mean, it's to keep them in shape and keep them down to size, because if you leave this grow, it'll just keep growing. Tardivas have the habit, they'll keep going. So you, more so than the Macrophylla hydrangeas won't get very tall, but these guys will. Some places you can see like limelights and Tardivas in tree form as well. So just to keep them contained.
Right. So in terms of
the area.
Yeah, how you want to have your landscape
exactly
flowing through. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Good.
Now another thing to look out for as well when you're pruning is crossing branches. If you want to look in here, Kathy, there's a branch here that's going up here.
Oh yeah.
That's crossing, and it's rubbing against other branches. So what you want to do is take that out, because it's going to eventually, it'll cause damage to some of the other stems, and you want to reduce that. Just be mindful when you are doing it how the shape of the tree will look like afterwards, because if you cut out something that's crossing, you could leave a very big hole or very empty. Whereas this, if we cut this out, this is not going to leave a very big hole or disfigure.
That's tight in there.
It is, it's tight. So, and take it out by sections. Don't try as, you can take it out. And you can always use a saw to get into these tight spaces as well. Now, if you look there, we're after taking out the crossing. You can see this has got damaged a little bit, but that's okay, that'll recover. It's not too severe that it won't recover. If it was on a bigger branch, then it might not come back, or over time it could die.
Very good.
Now sometimes as well, if you want to rejuvenate Tardivas, like if you have older Tardivas in your garden that have been there a while, they respond well to pruning, hard pruning. If they were getting too leggy or too high, sometimes you can cut a hydrangea even down to here, and this is where you'll get the new growth coming from.
So about even 24 inches or 18 inches?
Absolutely, depending on the eventual height that you want the hydrangea. In a normal setting, in a garden, if this was in your garden and you wanted to keep it this height, then, because Hydrangea Tardiva and Limelight, they could put on 24 inches of growth in a season. So you want to prune them down, so once they grow, they're at the height, your desired height of what you would like.
Correct. So Norma and I just walked down the field to where they have the Macrophylla hydrangea to talk about this style of hydrangea. So what can you tell us about this one?
So these probably are the most common hydrangea that are out here. These are the ones with our nice blue flowers, or pink if you wanted, but mostly blue out here. These are what we normally do with these is leave them for the winter time. You can take off the dried flowers in December if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. I know sometimes they blow around the garden and get cotton fences, so it might be, you could do that, but it's not necessary. It's this time of the year that we prune them, after the winter time and after the frost has passed. You will normally, what we do with these is just deadwood. Anything else, you don't have to worry about crossing branches in these because they're dense as it is. So I would take out just any deadwood. Now, to identify deadwood, again, you could scratch like we did above with the Tardivas, or if you look closely enough, you can see there's different color. This is like more a white color compared to this stem, and again, if you break it, it snaps off very, very easy. Now, when I said about pruning in the springtime, one of the reasons we do it is during the winter time, if we get a very harsh winter, the buds could be affected on the hydrangea, they could burn. Or in the springtime, when we get a beautiful day like today, but we still can get frost, and the buds start pushing on warm days and we get frost after that, then it could affect the buds. So normally with the height of the hydrangeas, I would leave until you're sure, until all the green buds come out, all your leaf comes out, and then you can clearly see what's dead and what buds are viable and what's not going to come back. If you see here, we're starting to see green growth here on these guys. So what I would do is just any of the deadwood, and with the deadwood, anything you're cutting out, take it right back to the base. Don't leave little stumps. Anything that's dead, just take it right back.
I guess that also helps with the air circulation then, right?
Exactly. We're all going back to the disease again. That'll all help. And when you are cleaning them out, you might have leaves from the winter time, and just clean all that out in between them. If you can see, there's nice green buds coming on here.
Yeah, I have that at my house actually, as my hydrangea has a lot of green growth at the base, and I was wondering if I should prune the whole thing back in height because it seems like it's only growing from the base. Is that true, or should I just leave it the way it is and let it do its thing?
I would leave it for the moment and let it do its thing. The branches could be dead, but I would wait until you can verify that.
Okay.
And usually you will tell definitely by the end of April, May, you will know what's dead and what's not dead. Because you really don't want to be pruning everything off and it's alive. Because some of the buds, you can see there's brown, so along the edge of the buds here, they're brown, but in the inside, if you open them a little bit, you can still see green. So that's still a viable bud there on that. Now, other pruning that you could do, again, it depends on where the hydrangea is positioned. If it's right beside a walkway or your lawn area, any of the branches stretching out over onto the lawn area or footpath, obviously you can take them back because they're going to impede the walkway. And as well, it could shade out the grass verge, and you'll get burned. The grass won't grow in underneath them. So you can take the hydrangeas back from that to prevent the grass from going brown underneath. So it depends on the positioning, and if there's other plants close by, if they're close together, obviously you want to give space between other planting. But these are pretty easy to maintain in the garden. So these are our Oakleaf Hydrangeas. This, as I said earlier on, this is one of the ones that flower earlier. It's probably one of the first hydrangeas that will flower. They, depending again on your position, they'll take more shade than any of the rest of the hydrangeas. And they get a beautiful long conical flower. The older the plant, the bigger the flower, and it's very, very nice. Normally the spring pruning, what we do on these is just anything dead and any obvious crossing branches. Once it's finished flowering, that's when you prune these back. These generally flower from June, July. That's when these are flowering. And they're
beautiful, and they look so much bigger than the other ones we had visited before, so they're quite nice. I could see these being like a backdrop, I guess, on a
Yes.
border.
Yes. And they're taller, so like the Tardivas, they'd use in the backdrop of a border, and you'd have smaller plant material, maybe your Macrophylla hydrangeas in front of them. So this is our final hydrangea we're going to look at. This is Hydrangea Annabelle. This is one of the earlier flowering ones as well. Flowers June into July. It's the one with the mop head flower, completely white, very, very pretty. Now, the pruning of this one is different again to the Macrophylla or the Tardiva, because with the Annabelle, you can cut it down to about 6 inches and it'll grow and flower on this year's wood. Generally, they're pruned back this one can be pruned back in the fall, or it can be pruned back in the spring. It really doesn't matter. It's not going to affect the health or the flowering of this hydrangea. Again, like any of the other hydrangeas I said, anything dead or anything crossing should come out of this. And that's pretty much it then for the Annabelle.